Hey there YouTube, I'm back with another work with me, this time a design from an illustration for a friend. So I have started with the underdays. I have 4 pieces, 2 torso pieces and 2 sleeves. Well, 2 dress pieces I guess and 2 sleeves. My first step is folding over, pinning and naturally sewing the edges of the circle on the sleeves for a neat finish. I also make small cuts around the most drastic corners to help me turn them over. So after sewing them, I'm going to start by pinning and then sewing the sleeves onto one of the dress pieces. So one sleeve on one side and the other sleeve on the other side. And naturally the fabrics are good side to good side. The fabric I'm using today is called Venetia. It's a very slippery and smooth, lightweight, super stretchy fabric that's difficult to work with. Anyway, now I take the other dress piece and then pin and later sew on the other sides of the sleeves to that piece. Naturally pinning the fabric good side to good side. The dress this time is a character design or original character of a friend, and I worked off an illustration they made. I'll show it to you later. So next step, I fold over, pin and sew the edges of the sleeves for a nice finish. Pinning over towards the wrong side of the fabric. And making sure that I pin the right amount on both sides. And after pinning those, I also pin the collar. Folding the fabric towards the wrong side, putting it in place and then sewing. After sewing that, I'm going to sew up the sides. I start pinning from the sleeves, then the armpit, and then the sides of the dress. Making sure everything matches up and lines up at those points. And then the other side. After sewing that, I check it on the doll and then I see, well, my dress form, and I see there is the fabric stretched out a bit, so I'm pinning those the extra bits of fabric closed at the seams between the sleeves and the main dress pieces. After carefully removing it from the dress form, I'm going to fold over, pin and sew the bottom edge of the skirt for a clean finish. And I'm also going to sew up those pinned areas at the top. And then I'm testing it on the doll. And since I'm happy, I'm continuing with the next part. It's a little shirt with 6 pieces: a center front, 2 side pieces, 2 back pieces, and a collar piece. My first step is pinning the side pieces to the center piece and sewing. And this time I'm using a woven fabric instead. After that, I sew the back pieces to the side pieces at the shoulders. With the fabric good side to good side, and then I also top stitch it for a neat finish. Well, for more stability. Now I'm pinning over, or folding over, pinning, and then later sewing the armholes. Since we have no sleeves, we have armholes. And since this is a stiffer, non-stretchy fabric, it's a bit more difficult than a stretchy fabric. But easier under the sewing machine. In general, stiffer fabrics are easier to control when sewing, and stretchy fabrics are more difficult to control, but it has a bit more leeway. Anyway, after sewing that, I'm checking it on the doll. Then I'm going to fold the collar in half and pin close the sides and sew them. Right now I'm just checking it on the shirt. And after sewing, I turn them inside out and press the seams with an iron and start pinning the collar to the neck hole. The best way to do this, which I didn't do, is start from the center of the neck hole and the center of the collar piece, and then pinning towards the sides. Sometimes it's a bit of a struggle. Now I forgot to mention that I'm pinning them good side to good side. And the collar is the same on both sides, but the neck hole isn't. checking it on the doll, and now I'm going to sew up the side seams. Start pinning from the underarm and going down to the bottom edge of the fabric for the shirt. And repeat on the other side. And sew them up, and checking it on the doll, well, this form. Checking how much the fabric overlaps. Now I'm going to be folding over, pinning and sewing the bottom edge for a nice clean finish. And as usual, folding over towards the wrong side. After that, I'm going to fold over, pin and sew the back opening of the shirt for a clean finish. And checking it on the dress form. And now I'm going to add hooks and eyes for closures. Now I'm sewing the hooks and eyes so that my thread aligns with the thread I sewed when sewing the edge that I folded over. I'm going slowly and making sure that the snaps align correctly on both sides of the shirt, which isn't very easy while it's on the doll or dress form. But I'm not always very smart. It's quite hard to maneuver around the dress form. So after that, I'm going to start with a corset skirt. I have lots of pattern pieces for my fabric and my lining. Anyway, it closes at the front, so I'm starting at the back. I sew I'll pin, sew and paste the seams with an iron. And then rinse and repeat, making sure that I got the right parts at the right locations. So pin and pinning and pinning, then sewing, then pressing the seams. And the last parts. Pinning, sewing, pressing the seams. So next I'm going to take my steps. Since they're not rectangles, I'm going to fold over the edges on both the long sides, pin them and sew them and iron them or press the seams. Just a note, ironing something and pressing the seams aren't quite the same. And pressing the seam is pressing and keeping your iron still. And ironing is moving your iron, basically. It does make a difference. Anyway, now I'm going to be attaching my straps with pins to the back of the corset and the front of the corset. Right sides to right side on the green fabric. It's a little complicated and it took me a few tries to do it right. At my last try, I pinned it from the front first and then pinned it to the back. And then I'm going to pin my lining to my fabric, sandwiching my straps between the two layers. And I'm first going to pin all along the top edge, making sure all the seams line up. And then I'm going to sew it. After sewing, I snip corners and curves well, first, I'm in a hurry. I pin and sew up the sides as well. Then I snip the corners, cut the corners and snip the curves so I can turn it inside out properly. Then after I've turned it inside out, I start pinning everything nicely in place, making sure the seams line up properly, and so on and so forth, making sure that my straps are in the right place. Well, I should have done that earlier. Anyway, making sure that I can pin everything neatly in place and that nothing's out of order. And then I'm going to sew between, well, on the edges of all my seams for that corset look. Next, I'm going to take the skirt piece and fold over and pin the open edge and sew that. Then I'm going to fold over, pin and sew the bottom edge of the skirt for a nice finish. If not for the design, I could have made it the skirt piece lined as well, but from what I saw from the design, it was green on both sides and it wasn't a very thick looking texture. I have no clue if I'm making sense or not. Anyway, after sewing, I press the seams and iron the fabric smooth, and then I start pinning it to the bodice of my corset. And off camera, I added eyelets, lacing and some hand embroidery. Also a belt with a little pocket and a strap. So next up is showcase of the outfit and then some photos including the illustration and the photos on the doll itself. So thanks for watching, and Kate, thanks for commissioning me. This was a really fun project and I quite like bringing illustrated designs into reality. So, bye!